source of all bliss, mysticism of Shaiva Siddhanta, and an insight into its sannyasa tradition. Swami Nityananda Giri. Introduction. This presentation is offered invoking the grace of the great sage of recent times, Sadguru Jnanananda, the guru of Swami Abhishektananda. Jnanananda lived at the peak of mystic experience, where all schools of thought are reconciled and transcended. He seemed to represent to every seeker his own faith. He was a master of both Shaiva Siddhanta and Vedanta lore, and quoted profusely from the texts of both traditions. He emphasized the importance of eschewing philosophical disputation and going beyond discursive thinking. Swami Abhishektananda asks him, "What is Swamiji's position concerning reality? Is it Dvaita or Advaita? When all is said and done, does any difference remain between God and creatures? For instance, is it possible for a man to enjoy God and eternally partake of the joy? Or is there finally beyond everything only being non-dual, Advaita, and indivisible in unlimited fullness?" "What is the use of such a question?" replied Sri Jnanananda quickly. "The answer is within you. Seek it in the depths of your being. Devote yourself to jhana meditation beyond all forms, and the solution will be given to you. It is an experience which cannot be labeled." "Then why are you so determined at all costs to find a name for that which is by very definition stripped of every possibility of being named?" Jnanananda exclaims elsewhere. Like Sadguru Jnanananda, Bhagavan Sri Ramana also did not see much difference between Siddhanta and Vedanta. According to him, Siddhanta is a philosophy of devotion and grace, and at the end of acts of devotion and meditation, one attains paribhakti, when, having completely overcome the attachment as mine to all things except God, he revels in the bliss of supreme love and service of the Lord, Iraipani Nitral. Vedanta, with its path of knowledge as self-inquiry, leads one to know the truth that the I is not different from the Lord, Ishvara, and to be free from the feeling of being the doer, Kartutva Shamkara. Whatever the means, the destruction of the sense of I and mine is the goal, and as these are interdependent, the destruction of either of them causes the destruction of the other, and the state of silence beyond thought and word is achieved. The end of the paths of devotion and knowledge is one and the same. In India, the various schools of philosophy are derived not from speculation, but from the direct experience of men of God. The mystic experiences reality in different ways. Moving in his own unlimited spiritual freedom, the liberated sage spontaneously records the glimpses of his experience without caring for consistency. Thus we have various insights into reality depending on different moods of the mystic. They are reduced to the philosophical concepts of various schools of philosophy which suit the different aptitudes of the seekers. Such concepts, in turn, together with the psalms and songs of the saints, which are spontaneous outpourings bearing the indelible stamp of their mystic experience and constitute the source of all the reference, take us back to their ineffable experience which defies categorization. All these spiritual exercises, consisting of study of scriptures of the various traditions and of reflection, are at best to cultivate our minds. The divine chooses to reveal itself in its own way at its own time to the person chosen by it, when he is therefore drawn to it in rapturous love. With these words of introduction, it is proposed to make a few reflections on some concepts of Shaiva Siddhanta, particularly with reference to the self's transcendent experience still retaining the trace of its individuality. Dr. Renate refers to this as asymptotic approximation to reality. The hyperbola never meets the asymptote, but goes on approaching it continually and meets it at infinity. So too the mystic's experience is a continuous, ever-growing, intuitive, and supersensuous one, almost but not total merging in God. Attention is also drawn to the place of sannyasa in this tradition and how it is the result of the most powerful descent of grace. Much samnyasa, as in the case of Saint Tayamanavar, leads one beyond all concepts to the transcendental experience of silence. Shaivite philosophy covers the entire spectrum of Hindu thought, while in all its forms it deals with three padarthas, categories, vyapati, God, pashu, self or soul, and pasha, bonds that fetter the soul, in the reality attributed to 36 tattvas, principles, and in the independence assigned to souls and matter. It varies from the idealistic monism of Kashmir Shaivism at one end to the pluralistic, in the sense of non-absolutistic, realism of Shaiva Siddhanta at the other, thus providing a wide range of philosophical perspectives. In all the forms of Shaivism, we find the insistence on knowledge as essential to salvation and as the prime cause thereof, a typical characteristic of the best Hindu thought. Shaiva Siddhanta conceives reality in three ultimate irreducible modes, Pati, Pashu, and Pasha. Though all the three are equally ultimate and eternal, Pashu and Pasha are dependent or finite existences, and Pati is an independent, infinite being. Their otherness is only affirmed in an existential sense, as also is their essential relatedness. Pati, God, is the infinite and unlimited, the very source and ground of being. As the transcendent reality, Pati is called Shiva. God is the supreme reality, at once the absolute of philosophy and the supreme personality, embodying every perfection which compels adoration. He is the supreme spirit of intelligence, Lord Shiva. There is none to equal or excel him. 8 are the attributes of Shiva: self-existence, purity, self-knowledge, omniscience, freedom from mala, defilement, boundless benevolence, omnipotence, and bliss. Shiva means the auspicious, the source of all bliss. Although Pati is the transcendent spirit, he is at the same time immanent in the conditions of finite life and existence, constitutive of man's bondage. As immanent in them, Pati is the redeemer of man from the limiting conditions of bondage. The name Hara indicates the redemptive nature of God. He removes all the impurities of the soul and redeems it from samsara, transmigration. He is nirguna, beyond prakriti, free from its three gunas of sattva, rajas, and tamas, which are finite. He is called Turiya, the fourth, because he is beyond the states of waking, dream, and sleep, which are conditions respectively of the three gunas of prakriti. He is at once immanent in the universe and transcendent to it. He is Vishvamaya, of the form of the universe, but the universe does not exhaust his nature. He is also Vishvadika, more than the universe. He exceeds the universe, while being its ground. Hence he cannot be perceived and comprehended by thought. He has no name and form. There are no identifying marks setting limits to him. Existing is his own right. He is Sat, being. He is Chit, the supreme intelligence, self-luminous, and knows all directly. It is God's intelligence that enlightens the soul, enables it to gather knowledge of the world through senses and other accessories of itself and of the Lord. He is Ananda himself, infinitely blissful. The Lord bestows bliss on all. His functions are Sristi, creation; Sthiti, preservation; Samhara, destruction; Tirodhana, concealment; and Anugraha, bestowal of grace. Of these, the first four have as their end the last one. The ultimate aim of the grand divine plan of the universe is the liberation of the soul through a shower of grace. Shiva hides the truth from the soul, projects the world as the field of its experience in which it evolves spiritually, and finally he emancipates the soul through his grace. The world process is Shiva's Leela. The transcendent nature of Shiva is emphasized by regarding him as the efficient cause of the world. The threefold change of origination, sustentation, and destruction of the world has its source in him, but God himself does not undergo any change. He is the unchanging ground of all the changes. The instrumental cause is Shiva's Shakti, and the material cause is Maya. Maya is so called because as the universe is revolved, Ma into it, and is evolved, Ya from it. It is from Maya that souls are provided with locations, bhuvana worlds, instruments, tanu, bodies, and karanas, and objects of experience, bhogya. Maya is inert and requires the intelligent direction and guidance which comes from Shiva through his Chit Shakti, power of consciousness. Shiva has no forms. God is with form and is formless as well. He is usually spoken of as an eightfold form, Ashtamurti. Manikavashagar, for example, sings earth, water, air, fire, sky, the sun and moon, the sentient man, these 8 forms he pervades. Tiravachakam 3:19, Tiratanakam 5. Translated by J. H. Nalaswami Pillai. There is no form for him whose glory is everywhere. Svetasvara Upanishad 4:19. That day when I became thy slave, I saw not thy divine form. Even today I fail to perceive thy blessed form. To those who ask, what is the form of thy Lord? What shall I say? What may be thy form? Hast thou any? Karakalamayar, Abhuta Tiruvantadi, verse 61. He is formless and yet has form. To the wise he has the form of awareness. He has form. Umapati Shivacharya, Tiruvarutpayan, verse 5. He assumes several forms so that the devotees may adore him in them. If it be said thou art formless, you have a form. If it be said thou hast a form, you are formless. Thou art neither the formed or the formless. Praise be to thee who has forms and art formless. Praise be to thee who hast 1,000 names. Manikavashagar, Potri Tiravagal, lines 193 and 200. Shiva comes as the preceptor, guru, in order to instruct, teach, and give the souls liberating knowledge. Out of his boundless love, he becomes tangible to terrestrials. Anugraha is his nature, love is his being. Tirumalar declares that there is no difference between God and love. Pashu is the self or soul. It is distinct from the body, indestructible, pervasive, varied, endowed with malas, impurity, non-inert, enjoyer of the fruits of its own actions, agent, possessor of limited knowledge and having an overlord. Its destiny is to realize Pati by conquering Pasha. Pashus are naturally infinite, pervasive, and omniscient, yet they experience themselves as finite, limited, and little knowing due to Pasha, or the three bonds, Anava, Karma, and Maya. The stages of sadhana. Anava is a connate impurity. It is a primordial and positive conditioning impurity, beginninglessly present in the souls like verdigris in copper, beginninglessly clouding the soul and thereby occasioning the phenomenal life of man. The concept of anava in Siddhanta corresponds to that of the beginningless ignorance or avidya in Vedanta. As it is the original cause of bondage, it is called mulamala, and compared to darkness, irul, being non-intelligent, it is operated upon by the Lord through his power of obscuration, Tiradana Shakti. It is due to Anavamala that the pervasive, vibhu, soul cognizes itself as finite, as if it were atomic, anu. Conditioned by the consequent limitation of cognitive and conative powers, the soul is promoted by appetition and aversion to engage in action. Action brings merit or demerit, which it enjoys in a series of births. This is the second impurity of karma, the bond forged by deeds. It is a realm of moral causation involving the sequence between action and its result, which sustains the phenomenal existence through a succession of rebirths. Mayamala is the third impurity, which is the material cause of the universe. It provides for the soul means, objects, and field of enjoyment to work out the result of karma. This is the asuda, or impure maya, which provides the phenomenal realm of existence, inclusive of subjective and objective spheres, the impure matter subject to the law of time. Suda, or pure maya, helps the onward spiritual progress of the soul, endowing it with a superphenomenal realm of existence, pure matter above the scope of asuda maya and karma, which, while partaking of the nature of phenomena, serves to mediate between the infinite pati and the finite pashu. But the knowledge and illumination due to the Sudamaya are limited. Pati, God, pashu, self or soul, pasha, bond. Namely, Anavamala, Karma, Maya, Suda, and Asuda are the three eternals of the Shaivite philosophy. The various schools of Shaivism accept the three categories, but there are differences in the conceptions of the nature of the relation between A. Pashu and Pasa, and B. Pashu and Pati. The spectrum is from radical dualism through qualified dualism to non-dualism. The relation between self and God in the state of liberation is the deciding point. In Shaiva Siddhanta, the gulf between the transcendent and infinite nature of Pati, Shiva, and the relative and finite realm of the phenomena which constitute the Pasha, bond, is overcome by the principle of Pashu, self, which nature as sadasat, real non-real, permits participation in both the realms. The nature of the self is to be properly understood, as it is relevant to the importance given to grace and to the realization of the self's oneness with Shiva as an experience. The self cognizes the phenomena through the accessories of Pasha, such as senses, and by completely identifying itself with the object to be known. Such cognition is Pasha Jnana, a demonstrative knowledge of knowing prospectively as subject of knowledge confronting the object. Pati, Shiva, is impartite and pure consciousness, and hence cannot be knower, pramater, like Pashu, which alone can have demonstrative knowledge. Pasha, which is only an object, pramaya, cannot also be a knower, pramater. Shiva and self are alike in intelligence, but the former is pure consciousness, which is revelatory. The latter, the self, is the subject that receives the revelation, because it can know Shiva only as and when shown. Upadeshin, self can know only by identifying itself with the thing to be known, by being or becoming the thing known. Tadbhava bhavita. Thus self is only gross consciousness, sthula chit. Shiva, on the other hand, is subtle consciousness, sukshma chit, who knows by himself and knows all without experiencing, for this reason, that is, without identification. It is therefore that Shiva is revelatory, upadester, to the recipient self, upadeshin. It is like what light is, external light, or light of the soul in relation to sight. Self attains to patijnana, or knowledge of Shiva, at the self-disclosure of Pati, Shiva, the Lord. Thus the self has the paradoxical nature of being neither sat nor asat, but being in a sense both, sadasat. This notion of self as sadasat rescues the appearances and saves phenomena on one hand, and also makes the spiritual realization of union with Shiva possible as an experience. It is because self is a knower, pramater, which is attainment to liberating knowledge. Patijnana is a possibility. The imparting of upadesha may vary according to the spiritual maturity of the soul, which has to be shown so that it may know that it is true. This is the descent of grace, or Shaktinipata, when Shiva appears in the guise of a preceptor, Sadguru, who vouchsafes to the self this true vision of himself. The last feature of the self's becoming what it experiences explains why even after disassociation from Pasha, Pashutva still lingers in the form of me and mine, against which the only available means of sadhana, again, consist of conscious meditation upon, identification with Pati by Shivoham, Bhavana, and Nididhyasana, culminating in the recovery of self by integration with Shiva, Shiva Yoga, and transcendent enjoyment of Shiva, Shiva Bhoga. As pointed out earlier, Shaiva Siddhanta is in accord with the Upanishadic dictum, through knowledge only is release. The phases of jnana contain the stages of hearing, sravana, reflection, manana, and contemplation, nididhyasana. This is in respect of Pashu, Pasha, and Pati. Emancipating knowledge, or Patijnana, is integral intuition of the truth of existence at its source, which entails freedom of the self from the finitude, from the thraldom of bondage, which is preoccupation with the phenomenal existence, body, senses, world, and worldly goods. Pashujnana encompasses the divine of subject and object, its intuition of itself, as ever in inseparable union with Shiva follows Shiva's revelation of himself, when the light of the divine rends the veil of obscurity. This patijnana that affects dissipation of pasha, pashaksaya, is non-empirical and intuitive, and grows into the ineffable Shivanubhava. But there could be no knowledge of the Lord, Pati, without the knowledge of and insight into the other two, via pashu and pasa. The three interact to result in the final transcendent experience of Shiva. In the knowledge of each of the three, there are three progressive stages of A. Rupa, which is prima facie definition laksana of things whose purpose is to differentiate and designate. B. Darshana, the metaphysical reason and insight, self-critical with discrimination between the real and the appearance, yet not integral knowledge. C. Suddhi, consummatory knowledge, direct, immediate, and intuitive, undistorted by impediments of impurity and awareness above knowledge. These three stages of knowledge of the three ultimates, of Pati, Pashu, and Pasha, together with their culmination in the recovery of self in the transcendent enjoyment of Shiva, constitute what are known as Dasha Karyani, or 10 actions or functions of spiritual life. Tattva Rupa, Tattva Darshana, Tattva Suddhi, Atma Rupa, Atma Darshana, and Atma Suddhi, Shiva Rupa and Shiva Darshana, Shiva Yoga, and Shiva Bhoga. They are stages of knowledge covering the entire spiritual journey from self's unquestioned oneness with tattvas, Tattva Rupa, to the all-embracing experience of the plenum, Shiva Bhoga. The first 8 of Dashakaryani constitute the means, sadhana, and the last 2, the fruit of result, phala. Whilst darshana is illuminative insight, suddhi is freedom. Obviously, there could be no Shiva Suddhi, but only Shiva Yoga, which is integral union with Shiva. Tattva Rupa and Tattva Darshana go with Atma Rupa. From the prima facie understanding of tattvas, Tattva Rupa, self-graduates to the discriminative philosophical wisdom, Tattva Darshana, when it realizes their character as objective and mutable, asat, and non-intelligent, achit. This follows in the wake of Atmarupa, the perception that self is neither sat nor asat, but what comprehends both as such. There is a coincidence between the next 3 of Dashakaryani, namely Shiva Rupa, Atma Darshana, and Tattva Suddhi. Atmadarshana follows in the wake of Shiva Rupa, perception of Shiva in the guise of the preceptor, Sadguru, who vouchsafes the true vision. Also, as a corollary to this Shiva Rupa Atmadarshana, there follows Tattva Suddhi, which means real freedom from tattvas, i.e. freedom from unquestioned identification with tattvas, with the sense of I and mine. This suddhi, or freedom, is the consequence of a felt disillusionment of their reality through the inculcation of the preceptor. With the advent of the preceptor-given knowledge, the gross manifestation of pasha in the form of tattvas ceases to obtrude. But the complete dissipation of pasha, pashakshaya, is yet to be attained. Even after tattva suddhi, the root mala still remains, as is evident from the dogging illusion of I, or selfhood, which now after dissociation from the not-self assumes prominence. Through tattva suddhi, one is led beyond tattvas to self, atmadarshana, which now appears to be foundational. There is no freedom from Pashutva till one intuits the truly foundational Jnana reality. Self-emptying, Atmasuddhi, should supervene on gaining insight into self's reality. The threefold sadhana for Atmasuddhi, which goes together with Shiva Darshana, comprises of Shivoham Bhavana, recital of Sri Panchakshara, and Antaryaga Puja. In the last of the 3, Shiva is contemplated as dancing in the sanctuary of one's being in the heart lotus, in a form made of the 5 letters of Panchakshara. Thus bhavana, meditation, mantra, recitation, and kriya, action, harnessing mind, feeling, and will as thought, speech, and action towards the same goal, namely Atmasuddhi, prepare it for Shiva Yoga, Shiva Bhoga. Shivoham Bhavana is contemplation of self on its true identity with Pati. It helps it to stand integrated in union with God as one with his being. The contemplation of the absoluteness of Shiva Shakti and of self's inconsequential reality, which is implied in Sri Panchakshara, recital brings about total surrender, giving up one's own will. Thus in Shiva Yoga, integral union with Shiva, through a union of being, freedom from lingering effects of mala, potent with seeds of duality, is achieved, whilst through union of will, freedom from residual effects of maya and karma is attained. It is, however, to be noted that both in Atmadarshana, self's insight about its reality and contrast with not-self, and in Shivoham Bhavana, Shiva as I, Pashutva still endures, Although imperceptibly with seeds of duality, the self recovers its ultimate reality by totally surrendering its egoity through its encounter with God. In Shiva Rupa, Shiva, by the application of his Kriya Shakti, sets at naught the sum total of stored up karma of the past Sanchita, together with its material locus of the form of Advan, which house the karma, namely Maya. This is done symbolically in the act of Nirvana Diksha by the Guru, the main feature of which is Advasuddhi. The self freed from the weight of karma and Maya is qualified for the dawn of jnana. In Shiva Darshana, by the application of his Jnana Shakti, Shiva dispels the prime evil of Mala, which has been limiting the self's potentialities from eternity, and reduces to naught in advance the fresh influx of karma due to self's present earthly life. Agamin, that part of karma which has already begun to bear fruit and has caused the present embodiment, prarabdha, is destroyed only by experience. In Shiva Rupa there is freedom from not self, tattvasuddhi. In Shiva Darshana is achieved freedom from assertion of self-being, atmasuddhi. In Shiva Yoga is attained freedom from the root source of me and mine, which outlasts all efforts of relinquishing self-assertion and persists by the very act of discriminating self from not self. This leads to the freedom of Shiva Bhoga. It further grows into the bliss of intuitive life, Shivatma or Shiva Bhoga. In Shiva Yoga there is only a foretaste of bliss, Shukaprabha, a negative consequence of the dissolution of Pashutva. In Shiva Bhoga is the positive experience of supreme bliss, Paramashuka, of the self-being flooded with Shivananda. Shiva Yoga is the twilight, Shiva Bhoga is the dawn. Shiva Yoga marks the fourth, or Turiya, with reference to the three other states of Shakala, Kevala, and Shuddha. The Shiva Bhoga is Turiyatita, beyond the beyond, i.e. transcendental. The former is a stage of Advaitic relation with Shakti, whereas the latter, Shiva Bhoga, is the ensuing Advaitic experience of Shivatma when Shakti sinks into Shiva. Saint Patinatar expounds it clearly in his definition of Nishtha as the beauteous Kachchi Ekampan affirmed. One should do away with and run away from delusive friends and woman, the deathless Mala. Then should one accompany the mother who is true grace, and then be one with the father, now totally oblivious even of the mother who led unto him. This indeed is Nishtha. Saint Patinathar, verse 10. Tiruvikambamale. This is Shiva Bhoga, which is the transcendent experience. In it, the self has an unbroken and immediate inward self-intuitive awareness of unity of being with Shiva as jnana, perpetual dedication towards Shiva, the transcendent I in the self as kriya, and ecstatic love for the indwelling person within its own personal being, growing from fullness to fullness as ichcha. Thus Shiva Bhoga is a mystical face-to-face experience of reality in terms of an encounter ever renewed and eternally new. The attainment of Shivatma is understood as complete mergence of being in Shiva, in the idealist school of Shaivism known as Kashmir Shaivism. But in Shaivasiddhanta it is a realization of an identity, of an essence, in spite of difference in existence. When the scriptures teach non-duality, Advaita, they do not mean to deny the existence of the two, but the duality of the two. They say they are not two, and not there are not two. Advaita does not mean non-difference, but only non-separateness from God. The soul after release still continues to exist as soul without merging into Shiva. The soul now enjoys its nature, which is Shivatma or Shiva Bhoga. The released soul, enjoying the nature of God as its own, delights in being a devoted servant of God. The soul has this transcendent experience of the bliss of Shiva when the obscuring powers of the Mala are neutralized and rendered impotent. Mala continues to exist, but without the sting of its veiling power. The nature of Mala and the Pasha, and that of Pashu as Sadasat, make for self's transcendent experience in Shiva Bhoga, in which Shiva experiences himself so that the self may experience him. This is the feature of the existential root of Shaivasiddhanta doctrine, of the eternity of the three in Mukti too. A mere righteous life of Dharma, of desire-prompted action and enjoyment with its implication of attachment and passions, and of the egocentrism implicit in them, does not bring about by its own momentum the development of the spiritual qualities essential for jnana, such as equanimity of mind and surrender to God. Performance of daily special and optional duties make for a high level in the life of action, but it still comes within pashupunya or merit, which is also a bondage, though with golden fetters. On the other hand, action consecrated totally to Shiva is Shiva punya. Even worldly deeds can be in this manner transmuted into Shiva punya. Thus, even in the very midst of the flux of karmic life, of action and reward, is to be found the clue for eventually transcending the natural law of deed and consequence. The Tirodhana Shakti of the Lord not only provides for the soul a life of action with ego drive, which makes for bondage, but also leads to its release through a spiritual life of Shiva Punya. Above the vocation of duty comes that of doing service to Shiva, and the fourfold scheme of Shiva Dharma, or Karya, Kriya, Yoga, and Jnana, is the sadhana for the progressive undoing of the sense of egoism by conscious surrender of all actions to the Lord. Charya is the first stage of external worship of images and rituals and service such as cleaning the temple and gathering of flowers, etc. God here assumes a grossly visible form, sakala. The action resembles those of a devoted servant to the master. It is a dasha marga leading to shalokya, residence in the realm of God. The next stage is kriya, where the modes of worship are inward as well as outward, as in recitals of prayers, meditation, and fire rites. God is in visible kum non-visible form, Shakala Nishakala, and the devotion here is akin to that of a son to his father. The son serves the father overtly and spontaneously and with inward allegiance. This is Satputra Marga, and the objective is Samipya, or nearness to God. The third discipline is yoga, which means union, and here signifies contemplation and inner worship. In this stage, God is non-visible, niskala, and the path is shakamarga, in which the sadhaka is the friend of God. It leads to Sharupya, gaining the form of God. These three stages of sadhana imply progressive revelation of God, Tirodhana Shakti, by a steady undoing of the veiling powers of Mala, which hides self's vision of the real. The self is now led to the final stage of jnana. It is the sanmarga, the right path, because it takes the soul straight to Sat, which is God. Devotion in this stage is typified in the self-surrendering love between a lover and his beloved. The fruit is the ultimate human good, shayujya, or union with God. The path of jnana with hearing, shravana, reflection, manana, and contemplation, nididhyasana, and the culminating experience, nista or samadhi, has been detailed earlier, with its further classification into deshakaryas, culminating in Shiva Yoga and Shiva Bhoga. By long experience of the cycle of birth and death, the soul learns to equate empirical good and evil, realizing the one as fleeting and intrinsically worthless as the other, and becomes indifferent to the acquisition of good karma as well as bad. It thus attains a tranquil frame of mind, disinclined alike towards so-called merit and demerit. This is karma samya. The stage is now set for the release of the soul. Such a person is now inimical to the active operation of the veiling power of Mala. The hold of Mala, reflected in the soul's inveterate impulse for exteriorization and entanglement in the phenomena, has now been slackened. With the soul's disillusionment about world experience, the Mala that so long obscured and hindered is now ripe and fit for the divine surgeon's knife. The grace that was operating by veiling, as it were, with the veil of Mala till now, namely Tirodhana Shakti, has now become transfigured into the grace that reveals Anugraha Shakti. The soul now seeks the omniscience, which is its own nature and birthright. This is the onset of divine grace, Shaktinipata. It is quick or slow depending on the capacities and the sadhana of the soul. When the grace has fully set in, the Lord reveals himself and instructs the soul. To the Vijnana Kalas with Anava have a mala only, he reveals himself as their own inner light, to the pralayakalas with anava and maya malas in a divine supernatural form, and to the shakalas with all the three malas of anava, karma, and maya as a preceptor, apparently like one among themselves, and gives them the diksha or initiation. Diksha, initiation. Diksha is the divine act of initiation. The word implies a gift, dana, and a loss, ksaya, gift of knowledge and loss of bond of mala. It secures the destruction of pasha and attainment of mukti, which is union with Shiva. It is a manifestation of Shakti, the power of Shiva. Shivashya Vyapakatmaka Shakti. It enables the sadhana with the least powerful descent of grace to discharge his daily special and optional duties enjoined in the agama and hear the revealed word. To the aspirant with most powerful descent of grace, it is the immediate means of moksha, qualifying him for directly receiving jnana. Of the three well-known initiations, Samaya Diksha confers fitness to enter a life of ritual, Shaivacharya or Charya, and Vishesha Diksha to practice Kriya and Yoga. The third initiation, Nirvana Diksha, qualifies one for directly receiving jnana and is therefore considered the immediate means of moksha. The various commentators on the concerned scriptural texts differ in their classification of types of dikshas. Diksha, when it involves homa or fire rites, is called hautri or angi with parts. When homa is done actually, it is known as kriya hautri. The other, in which the homa is performed mentally by bhavana, it is jnana hautri. In it, the preceptor mentally enters the body of the disciple, considers his nabhisthana navel as the kunda pit for fireplace containing Shivagni, and performs the bhavana, the homa, to purify the six advas. Hautri Diksha is unique and includes other dikshas as its parts. Such ancillary dikshas are of six kinds: Nayana, look; Sparsha, touch; Vachaka, words, i.e., initiation into the Panchakshara; Manashika, mental; Shastra, scriptural study of Shaivagamas and Shaivasiddhanta; and Yoga, practice of Naradara Shiva Yoga. These subsidiary initiations, only without the fire rites of Hautri, will constitute partial initiation, or Anga Diksha. Nayana Diksha is of three kinds. Sringara, in which the preceptor is like one who had achieved identity with Garuda by yogic powers as a result of chanting the mantra, and treats a person bitten by snake by looking at him and drawing off the poison, bathing him in Amritakala by identification with the moon to remove the fatigue. 2. Nigraha Avalokana, in which the Guru destroys the disciple's identification with Pasha by his gaze, through which his own consciousness is merged with that of the disciple. 3. Anugraha Avalokana, in which the preceptor's look is that of grace for the spiritual well-being of the recipient soul. In Sparsa Diksha, the preceptor performs certain rites by touch to remove the pupil's bondage and to make him like Shiva, just as base metals are transmuted into gold by the proverbial touch of the philosopher's stone. In Manasha Diksha, the Guru, starting from his own outgoing breath, Rechaka, and through the incoming breath, Puraka, of the disciple, and his Shushumna Nadi, reaches his heart center and raises his awareness to the Jnanagni, fire of knowledge, in his Dvadashanta, 12th abode in the head. The preceptor contemplates in his own heart on the disciple's consciousness being pervaded by that of Shiva, like salt being dissolved in water, and reinstates it in the Kundali sthana of his body. Those who are eligible and are able to perform Nitya, Naimittika, and Kamya karma daily, special and optional rites, are initiated to them by Sadhikara Diksha. Others are given Niradhikara Diksha. When the mantra includes a Bijakshara, it is Sabija Diksha. Otherwise, it is Nirbija. Samaya and Vishesha Dikshas are both Niradikara and Nirbija. In Diksha, a spiritual purification is achieved, issuing in the dawn of knowledge. The main feature of Nirvana Diksha is Advasuddhi. In it, the Advan, representing the mantra, Pada, Varna, Bhavana, Tattva, and Kala, are purified by the progressive merging of the gross into the next less gross by Kriya Shakti. Then the stored up, or Sanchita karma, together with its material locus, Maya, is set at naught, and the soul is freed from their burden. Then he is initiated into Mukti Panchakshara and Jnanapada of Shaiva Agamas. When the Nirvana Diksha results in immediate release, it is called Sadhya Nirvana. In the Asadhya Nirvana Diksha, the release comes after death. When Sabija Nirvana Diksha is given to householders, it is called Lokadharmini or Bhautika. The same when given to those who are leading a life of celibacy and renunciation is called Shiva Dharmini or Naishtika. When the tuft of hair is removed, the head is tonsured. This is an immediate prelude to Samnyasa Diksha. Samnyasa. Shaiva Siddhanta, like Advaita Vedanta, holds that the path of knowledge is sadhana par excellence and is the true path. Sanmarga and Karma, Diksha, Bhakti, etc., which are indeed well recognized spiritual disciplines, are the other sadhanas in the secondary sense which lead to jnana. Yet in Shaiva Siddhanta we do not find the same affirmation as in Shankara Advaita that karma is totally incompatible with knowledge, and there should be total renunciation or samnyasa of all karma as a prelude to jnana nishta. We do not find here the insistence that one should take to Shravana or hearing only after being initiated into Samnyasa. This can be well understood, as Shaiva Siddhanta is a theistic school, where worship of God finds an important place till the end of sadhana, and the liberated soul also continues to be a devoted servant of God. Hence the upasana with bhavana of Shivoham and recitation of Mukti Panchakshara are prescribed in the life of a sannyasin also. This worship is, however, internal. This puja is jnana puja and antara yaga puja, internal worship. Although God is the holy other, he is yet one with the soul at the same time, and we can worship him in the sanctum of the heart. Yet we find the phenomenon of samnyasa well pronounced in the Shaiva Siddhanta tradition also, as it is itself the fundamental characteristic of the Hindu approach to the divine reality. As the means to the ultimate value to be cherished in human life, or parama parashartha, which is moksha, samnyasa finds the most respected place in the fourfold scheme of life, or ashrama. It is called forth in relation to the earlier three ashramas, stations of life, of student, householder, and forest dweller. Although samnyasa may seem to be the culmination of the first three, it is still a total break from them, and complete transformation, as a ball turned inside out, indeed a rebirth in spirit, as the initiation itself implies when the sadhaka takes the diksha clad in space as though born anew, and assumes a new name, which indicates total absorption in the divine. It takes him beyond all dharmas, ethical and religious duties. He has now conquered the natural impulse of externalization and entanglement in the phenomena. He has declared the fundamental necessity of leaving the world and all the creatures and embarking on a total interior life. He has realized the transitoriness of all things finite, and for him even the celestial worlds are included among the relative phenomena which are fleeting in nature. He has also understood in the depth of his heart the truth of the Upanishadic dictum, by renunciation thou shalt enjoy. We can enjoy true liberty only in respect of all such things as we neither possess nor desire. It is the ascent of Mount Carmel. That thou mayest have pleasure in everything, seek pleasure in nothing. That thou mayest know everything, seek to know nothing. That thou mayest possess all things, seek to possess nothing. In detachment he finds quiet and repose. He covets nothing. Nothing wearies him by elation, and nothing oppresses him by dejection, because he stands in the center of his own humility. The poverty of a monk is true self-stripping and casting off of all wealth, material and immaterial. It is a complete detachment from all finite things. Chastity in the extreme and limpid purity of the soul, cleansed from all personal desire and virgin to all but God. Obedience is the abnegation of selfhood and mortification of the will, which result in a complete self-abandonment, a holy indifference to the accidents of life. These are karma shamya and malaparipaka, ripening of the mala, which bring with them the descent of grace, shaktinipata. Samnyasa is a departure from the worldly round, to delight in solitude, steeped in the thought of God and living in the eternal now, dead to the past, indifferent to the present, and least of all worried about the future. The irresistible inner urge, the inner awakening, frees the samnyasi from all duties. Samnyasa overtakes him, and it is immaterial whether he has been given the formal external diksha or not, or whether he carries the insignia or not. We find in the lives of saints such a sudden and total transformation on the descent of grace. Besides such spiritual geniuses, Shaiva Siddhanta provides for initiation into samnyasa for qualified aspirants. It is the commencement of preparation for a mystic life, which is also the result of descent of grace, although of lesser intensity. The Guru puts the disciple through a very tough period of trial and probation, and after finding him fit for samnyasa, confers it on him at an appropriate time, chosen intuitively with the guidance of the divine grace. In Hinduism, such conferment of samnyasa is done with great care, as it is the path of no return, and it is only when there is a break of karma that one receives such samnyasa diksha. The initiation into samnyasa follows nirvana diksha, which is jnana diksha. Its aim is attainment of paramoksha, which is beyond the other lower levels of mukti, such as shalokya, samipya, and sharupya, which are attained through charya, kriya, and yoga respectively. The discrimination between these lower levels of mukti and the higher paramukti, and hankering after the latter, are themselves indicative of a very highly spiritually advanced nature in the aspirant receiving samnyasa diksha. The agamas speak of three types of samnyasins: tapashvi, vividishu, and vidvan. Tapashvi is devoted to his own tapas, or contemplation of Shiva. He has nothing to study, no scriptures to hear, and resolve to fulfill. He does not let other people know his depth of knowledge, nor does he gather disciples. He may not even carry danda or kamandalu, or for that matter any other insignia, and may not even reveal his knowledge of languages. Seeking solitude and avoiding the company of men, he may be staying in a forest or spending his time underneath a tree. Vividishu is one who wants to know and has been initiated into samnyasa. His fourfold activities are study, teaching, hearing of scriptures, and contemplation of Shiva. Vidvan is one who has been specially anointed as acharya and is qualified to initiate others. He is well qualified with knowledge and experience for that purpose. Shivagara Yogin, a famous saintly commentator, in his book Shaiva Samnyasa Padati, especially clarifies that apart from the first three castes, those belonging to the fourth are also eligible for initiation into samnyasa. The initiation of the former is the same as in Vaidika tradition, with the preliminaries of Jivasrada, Tantra, etc., and the pronouncement of Acharana of Praisa mantra, which is renunciation of all the three worlds of Bhuva, and Shuva. In the case of the fourth caste, instead of Paisha mantra, the initiate repeats 5 times in increasingly louder voice the shloka in which he declares his renunciation of all, father, mother, son, wife, and everything except Shiva alone. Shivagra Yogin's manual, or Samnyasa, gives complete details of the rituals connected with initiation, Bhiksha, Shravana, etc. After giving a detailed account of Shamaya, Vishesha, and Nirvana Dikshas, Samnyasa Diksha is described as given to those leading a celibate life and already initiated into Nirvana Diksha as a means of attaining attaining paramoksha. The famous sage Tirumular's Tirumandiram, which is the 10th book in Shaivite canonical literature, devotes a section to renunciation. He says that samnyasa, in the result of Shaktinipata on the soul's attainment of karma samya and mala paripaka, to such a samnyasin Shiva reveals himself, and the Lord is his sole friend and refuge. Tirumular stresses the necessity for the samnyasin to strictly abide by the monastic code and be eternally vigilant and extremely persevering in accordance with the instructions of his guru. The reference seems to be both to the enlightened ones and also to those on the path among samnyasins. Only those who have completely conquered Vasanamala and the challenge of phenomena and have overcome ignorance and transcended time attain to union with Shiva. Samnyasa is the total conquest of senses and channelizing of all the energies Godward. He concludes the section with a reference to the awakening of Kundalini and rising to the Sahasrara and the beatific vision of Parashiva. Saint Tiruvallvar in his Tirukural praises the greatness of renunciates in 10 couplets. To the minds of Shaivites, Saint Patinathar symbolizes the highest watermark of Vairagya. His psalms on the transitory nature of all human relationships and worldly goods are most popular and inspiring. Neither place nor kin will last, neither wives nor hard-earned name will last, neither children nor honors will last, so too wealth will not. None in this world will last. Your feet alone are everlasting. O Kachchi Akampa. Saint Patinathar, verse 13, Tiruvikampamalai. His definition of samnyasa is one of the most exacting descriptions to which every mumukshu, which aspire to live up to the renouncer of domestic life, is a million times greater than he who is poised in household dharma, then even he is the one who is a renunciate at heart, 10 million times greater. How can I articulate, O Kachchiakampa, the glory of him who by his study and knowledge had quelled all adharma, and lives dead to the world, rid of twofold karma and vishanas? Saint Patinathar, verse 1, Tiruvikampamalai. He equates the true samnyasin to a jnani and describes him in the following words. They roam in forbidden places like a ghoul, lie in a carcass like a dog, eat alms when given, and wander like a fox anywhere. They deem good women as mother and speak to all, as they would to their kin with humility, and are like babes. Behold them, the true and clarified jnanis. Saint Patinarthar, verse 35, Podu, General. His description of the freedom in which the Samnyasin moves about is equally inspiring. One is reminded of the Buddhistic text in which the monk is compared to the rhinoceros. An extremely interesting and famous sadhana manual is Ojivil Odukam by Sirkazi Kanudaya Valal. The theme of the book is obvious from the title itself, which means quietude in retirement. One full chapter is devoted to Vairagya and another to Samnyasa. He says that pure Samnyasa is a stage of Atmasuddhi attained through Atma Darshana and Atma Rupa. Samnyasa is the result of Shaktinipata. He particularly emphasizes the need for external Samnyasa. He also holds that the external and internal aspects of Samnyasa mutually supplement each other. Silence, beyond duality and non-duality. Saint Tayumanavar lived in Tamil Nadu about 200 years ago. His psalms have a rare metrical beauty and melody and bear the unmistakable stamp of his direct experience of God. The mystic poet's spiritual experience hinges on the one word spoken to him in secret by his guru, whom he calls Mainuguru, or the silent teacher, or the teacher of silence. It is the injunction, be still. Thus he bade him to be still in a state of selfishness. Tayumanavar says, He with one word, with grace prevenient, made me his own and made me live by love. By perseverance in this way of silence, and with total surrender to God and Guru implied in the one word, he attained to the bliss of union with God. There is an apparent difference between Vedanta and Shaivasiddhanta. In the former, the soul, being non-different from God in its essential nature, merges with him. In the latter, the soul is distinct, eternal in its nature, with a mala or impurity of anava. Hence, after union with God, the soul still retains its individuality with the veiling power of anava neutralized. Thus, the soul has an experience of its union with God Shiva and his transcendental bliss. Tayamanavar in his Psalms refers to Vedanta Siddhanta Samarasa, an eclectic harmonizing of the two. He speaks of the godly Samarasa, which consists in an affirmation of neither oneness or two-ness in the great silence. These words remind us of a line in a minor work, Prakarana Grantha, of Shankara, Pradhanubhuti, the great experience. In the samarasa, devoid of duality and non-duality, silence is best accepted. Samarasa means reconciliation or harmony. By sama is also meant Brahman, and by rasa the impartite awareness. It is to be clearly understood that this Vedanta Siddhanta Samarasa is not yet another doctrine of philosophy, neither is it a mere academic acquiescence or syncretism. Tayamanavar calls it Mana Samarasa, which is above all creeds. It is the highest experience of mystic silence, which is beyond all mentation. It is the final leap at the culmination of incessant sadhana, or spiritual endeavor, and total renunciation, samnyasa, in a tradition which leads beyond itself in the experience of the transcendence. Elsewhere, Tayamanavar identifies Vedanta Siddhanta Samarasa as total and complete surrender. He says, "Always my deeds are your deeds. I am non-different from you, as my being, as I, cannot be apart or without you." The nature, svabhava, of Vedanta Siddhanta Samarasa is just this. I may conclude with a few readings from Psalms of Tayamanavar rendered as free translations into English, on the impermanence of worldly goods and relationships. Father, mother, wife, child, kinsman, all these are but people gathered at a fair. Of this there is no doubt. Palaces, armies of cavalry, infantry, elephants and chariots, all this pomp and splendor are just a juggler's show. This body full of filth is further afflicted by the parasites of deceit, envy, and miserliness by devastating the mind. Why, then, is it that I have not cultivated desirelessness and a conviction that every day that passes is equal, but continue to be caught up in the swirling vortex of the turbulent mind, unmindful of the veritable flood of your grace that is waiting to cleanse and devour me? O Lord, who art enthroned in my heart as pure consciousness, which knows no dawn or setting, and as plenum of existence, sat, hard to seek and intuit, O glory of light and bliss. Tejamayanandam 3. He hails God as Turiya, the great silence. Countless are the lands of my birth, countless my names assumed, countless the kinsmen, countless the bodies I have borne as the fruits of my deeds, countless the actions performed, countless the thoughts, countless the fame and prosperity enjoyed, countless too the heaven and hell I have passed through, countless are the good gods, countless the differing religious creeds. Wherefore, realizing by the Jnana Chit Shakti, energy of consciousness of awareness, I bow in obedience to God, who like the myriad clouds together pours the rain of ineffable bliss, filling the eyes of the beloved ones and the skies, to the form of Turiya, the great silence, the treasure par excellence, called by the Vedas by countless names and described by them in countless ways. To this great being, which is Jnana, the awareness, and Ananda, the unsurpassed and infinite bliss, I offer my obeisance. Parashivavanakam 2. That which is the limitless expanse, the source of the five elements, where prevails the great silence that speaks not, that which is the transcendent bliss beyond the reach of the mind, that which is revealed by the grace of the Jnana Guru, which draws to itself and swallows the devoted, and that when it blends with all things and bears names and forms, which is difficult to discern, on that we meditate. Paurvanakam 3. Away with impure desire, seek moksha. When all thoughts subside in the great stillness, it is called aham. This state of mindfulness is grace, arul. In that interiority of nishtha abides grace. As the finitude of the self is transcended, this state of grace emerges of itself. that is, oneness with bliss. The soul in that state becomes one with Shiva, Tat. There is nothing beyond. They alone who have attained to this beatific state obtain the final release from rebirth. All other desires, as for wife, children, and kinsmen, constitute the impure vasanas, latent mental impressions. Therefore stamp out desires with the help of Guru's Upadesha of the one word. Ninaivu Onru 1. Silence the samarasa, harmony of Vedanta and Siddhanta. It was the fullness of thy grace that drew me to abide in that state of mind which is the witness, accepting all that happened to me and all that did not befall me, that gave me the intuition to grasp clearly the tradition of samarasa, harmony, of Vedanta and Siddhanta, that led me on the path of knowledge which shows the falseness of the body, which is not lasting, and to the realization that attainment of eternal bliss is the final liberation, and endowed me with an inner love that runs in profusion like pellucid water. If you deign to save me, who have none else to protect me, I pray that you graciously grant me an unceasing love of the transcendental silence, beyond the ken of all the worlds. O my Lord, wherever I turn and look, I only see an all-embracing, unbroken, full, and all-pervading bliss that is your form. Paripurnandam 8. The Vedas, Agamas, Puranas, Itihasas, and all else mainly proclaim in detail the paths of Advaita, non-duality, and Dvaita, duality. The valuable and commendable Dvaita, dual, is verily the fountainhead of the Advaita, non-dual, awareness. This is also in accordance with reason, inference, experience, and scriptures, and is acceptable to the protagonists of both the systems. Therefore I have no need any more of the fourfold sadhana of charya and the rest. I become that which I meditate on. Therefore if I meditate on you as my own self, I shall intuit the non-dual reality. When you are the gracious Father, who comes to each aspirant in the manner of his seeking, what then is my want? O my Lord, who art the life of all lives, the summum bonum, both here and beyond, and the all-pervading reality, engum nirinda, Poral 3. The Vedas declare that God and the soul are in essence the same, both being in the nature of consciousness. Phenomenally, they appear as dual entities. In the state of Nishta or Samadhi, which the Shaivagamas speak about, they are non-dual. Udal Poyaravu 16. O the final repository of Siddhanta, O Dakshinamurti of Shiragiri, the silent one that taught me that beyond union and separation, beyond the pairs of opposites, beyond evolution and involution, beyond the gunas of Prakriti, beyond death and birth, beyond the fixed symbol, beyond impurity, beyond seeking, beyond the spatial directions of above, below, middle, or beside, beyond bindu, beyond nada, and beyond the fivefold differentiation of elements, beyond the empirical knowledge of the knower, beyond sorrow, beyond one non-duality and two duality, beyond the word and beyond the mind, immersed in the ocean of infinite bliss, is that effortless transcendental awareness beyond one's seeking. You graciously blessed me with the subtlest grace and the love of a mother, and placed both your feet on my head. You taught me that the objectless awareness, or nirvikalpa samadhi, is the eternal tradition, without mentation or chant of mantra, without saying that in the state of liberation there is one or two, without imagining it as light or space or form or nada, that is sound, seeing without seeing, is the spiritual culture, which yields the greatest experience, beyond any sadhana. O Blessed One, grant that I may intuit that which you have imparted to me, and let me be in the holy company of your illumined devotees. Chinmayananda Guru 8, 9. In the Hindu tradition, as also in the Christian tradition, the yearning soul is likened to a bride who rejoices in the Lord, her beloved. In the Ballad of Spiritual Experience, called by him as A Revel in Bliss, Ananda Kalipo, Saint Tayamanavar, in verses of exquisite beauty and sublimest feeling of love, narrates his own mystic union with God. A few verses are rendered in free English translation. He who is the uncreated and eternal, light in me luminous, awareness and bliss. He shone as the silent teacher, sister, spoke the unspoken word in Chinmudra, Shankara, Shankara, Shambho. Sever all attachments within, bade he, cling but to me, And, O sister, I gazed unswerving at the source within. How shall I describe that experience? Knowledge unmediated imparted he to me. Shankara, Shankara, Shambho. Manifest and unmanifest, hitherto cognized, that your mind perceived all of them, negate, said my lord, sister, marvel at his felicity in making me his self. Shankara, Shankara, Shambho. Love unto those who love him, the true one, my silent Lord, all bliss and grace incarnate, placed his holy feet on my head. Lo, sister, the mind was dead. I had vision of the self. Shankara, Shankara, Shambho. He, God and all with the eyes of grace, said he understanding it not. I saw many with senses and mind, and darkness was all I beheld. Why was it so, sister? The seer in me I had failed to see. Shankara, Shankara, Shambho. Lest I deem him from me separate, without duality, be with a still mind. Blessed was I with this only instruction, sister. Oh, how can words express this bliss it led me to? Shankara, Shankara, Shambho. Realizing the state of bliss of Shiva, seeking the infinite expansive being, casting off the darkness of ignorance, sister, I saw nothing but the Lord's Chidakasha, full of splendor. Shankara, Shankara, Shambho. There is the birth and beginning of thought. In him it dies to be reborn but purer, where all the states exist, yea, there I am, the seer not seeing a second, there I stand. Shankara, Shankara, Shambho. Is there any here and there, when one sees that effulgence of impartite Satchitananda, filling and pervading all, the transcendent real, can we postulate of him one or two? Shankara, Shankara, Shambho. Yea and nay, contrast, do they exist? O thou seeker of bliss, stand still and see the way of knowing the one, not the awarer, but awareness be. The goal of the Vedas, sister, he teacheth me. Shankara, Shankara, Shambho. Saint Tayamanavar, Ananda Kalipu, verses 1, 3, 8, 10, 13 through 15, 20, 21, and 30. The Mysticism of Jesus the Christ. Raymond Panikar. Rabbi Ubimanes, venite et videbitis. Master, where do you stay? Come and see. John 1:38 through 39. 1. The approach. That which was since the beginning, which has been heard by us, which has been seen with our eyes, which has been looked upon and touched by our hands, the word of life, and life has been manifested, and we have seen her, and bear witness to her, and announce her to you, eternal life, that which was with the Father, and has been manifested. 1 John 1, 1 through 2. The occasion. In the preparation for this seminar on Shaiva and Christian mysticism, I noticed with astonishment that among the many topics on Christian mysticism, the most central paper was lacking, the mysticism of Jesus Christ. Two reasons appeared to me to explain this absence, the one rather positive, the other somewhat negative. The positive reason was the parallelism and regime of equality we wanted to maintain. Christianity and Shaivism are two powerful and ancient traditions. We should treat them on an exactly equal footing, avoiding any kind of bias in favor of either tradition. It would be awkward, to say the least, to include a paper on the mysticism of Lord Shiva in a person, as it were. We were directing our attention to the experiences of his disciples. Similarly, we were focusing our attention also on the mysticism of the disciples of Lord Jesus Christ. But whereas the attempt to speak of the self-consciousness of Shiva makes little sense, the attempt to describe the self-consciousness of Jesus, difficult as it may be, is not altogether out of the question. We perceive here immediately the need to establish comparisons on a double basis. All too often comparisons have been carried on from one single perspective. The historical aspect of Shiva is irrelevant. Not so that of Jesus. Shiva is neither an avatara nor an incarnation. We are able to speak of a Shaiva mysticism without imposing on Lord Shiva our ideas about mysticism. Shaiva mysticism is the mystical vision that Shaiva believers have had about reality in and through what they believe is Shiva's grace or illumination. Christian mysticism could be said to be something similar, and in fact most studies on Christian mysticism take this path, but there can be no doubt that Christian mysticism is directly or indirectly embedded in the personal experience of Christ, both as an objective and a subjective genitive. The homeomorphic equivalent of Christ here is not Shiva, but his Shakti. The negative reason for the absence of such studies may lie in the mostly unconscious Christian prejudice that Jesus Christ is above all others and beyond any comparison, so we do better to leave him out of comparative mysticism. We shall know the Master in and through his followers. This is fair enough within the Christian tradition, but our seminar was not a specifically Christian one, and we could not a priori avoid treating Jesus as, say, Abhinavaguptacharya, for both are certainly historical figures. Jesus should not be a taboo for Christians. They may consider him as God, and one does not make any anthropological, let alone psychological, analysis of the Godhead. It would be absurd to speak of God's mysticism. But he was also a man, and one ought not avoid trying to study him as one would study any other individual. It has been rightly remarked that Jesus the preacher of the message became Jesus the preached message. In point of fact, most Christologies deal with the message and are based on the impact of Jesus on the first communities. But can we understand the message without understanding the messenger? We hear what he said, we know how the others understood him, and this may be the reason why, in Christian theology, with the exception of the mystics, so little emphasis is put on personal experience. Are we at all allowed, at least in some degree, to reenact his experience, in order that our understanding will be not just a whimsical subjective perception, but a reenactment of the original experience? Thus the rather high-sounding title of this study, which expands on the paper given at the seminar. We have just indicated that the Sitz im Leben of this meditation is not the usual Christian milieu. Traditional Christian theology deals either with the complexities of the Christian religion seeking to understand and formulate its own basic tenets, or it deals with the effort to present Christian beliefs in a manner comprehensible to the secularized post-Christian people of the Western or Westernized world, a dialogue in depth from within the basic insights of Christianity and Shaivism has hardly taken place up to our times. The Shaiva religions can be called, at most, a-Christian, but they are neither anti-Christian or post-Christian, as the word non-Christian generally suggests. Being partners in dialogue at this symposium as either Christian or Shaiva believers, and aspiring to understand Christ in this context, the background of the following reflections should not be that of inner Christian controversies or that of the usual Christian apologetics. The background is not what I would call the Abrahamic phylum of Christianity, but rather the general horizon of the Indic mentality, mainly of Vedantic spirituality. The first condition for teaching Sanskrit to Gopal is to know Gopal, says an Indic saying. The first condition to make oneself understood is to know your partner. This implies obviously to know the context into which the partner is going to insert what one is about to say in order to understand it. History, past and present, tells us too much of far-reaching misunderstandings caused by not following this elementary rule. By doing this, I do not pretend to indulge in comparative studies. I aim only at being intelligible within a context which is not the Judeo-Christian Muslim Marxist scientist one, and in order to be more concrete, I have given a certain preference to the Upanishadic mentality, without affirming that it represents a pan-Indic horizon. I attempt therefore a Christian discourse in silent dialogue with a Shaiva mind and heart, a Christian text purporting to make sense in a Shaiva context. I insist on this point. Although writing in a Western language, I should also take into account Western Christian sensitivity, and in fact the critique of some theologians has made me aware that I should not neglect the modern exegetical perspective, which I take for known. Our discourse has been going on for 20 centuries, and we need to pay our respects to our ancestors and contemporaries. I repeat, we cannot neglect tradition, but we have no right to freeze it either, and in fact an increasing number of Westerners, especially younger generations, feel more and more estranged by the venerable exegetical and theological approaches. An example, and I am tempted to add a paradigm, may be helpful. Latin American Christology, as reflected and practiced by the so-called theology of liberation, we cannot help but formulate certain suspicions, writes one of its best exponents. For some reason it has been possible for Christians in the name of Christ to ignore or even contradict fundamental principles and values that were preached and acted upon by Jesus of Nazareth. The Indic background of this study is and is not similar to that of Latin America. It is similar inasmuch as the present-day social structures and historical situation are perhaps even worse than those of Latin America. The word Dalit epitomizes what we want to say. It is neither a Christian word nor an exclusively Christian concern, but it cannot be ignored by any Christian reflection. Any Christology in India worth the name should be mainly Dalit Christology. The Indic situation is but also dissimilar on two main accounts. On the one hand, although colonial Christianity may have its part of responsibility for the present situation, the 2% of the Christian population cannot be compared with the over 80 and perhaps 90% of the Christians of the Latin American continent. On the other hand, the Indic psyche, as well as the religious traditions of Indic peoples, which are much larger than the boundaries of the Indian nation, have another experience of and approach to reality than the mainly historical awareness of the Abrahamic traditions. I had to insert this remark for the sake of clarification, but I should equally emphasize that this study is not a Christology, but a mystical meditation on the man of Nazareth against the backdrop of Indic cultures. And for this reason I do not shun the word mystical, ambivalent as it sounds in many circles, but my intention is not Christian apologetics. Some readers may find it awkward that I insist in giving Greek and Latin quotes, and even, although sparingly, introduce some Sanskrit words. This is done on purpose. The more we dare to go forward, the more we need to be rooted in tradition. Most of the Christian reflection is not based on King James Version. Most of our present insights have been, since long ago, patrimony of humanity, although in different contexts. Those foreign words are like immigrants in our countries. They enrich our awareness that we are not alone and prevent us from becoming provincial. Even the English kine today cannot be limited to the idioms and sensibilities of the inhabitants of the British Isles. I should finally remark that the literary genre of this study is neither exegesis nor apologetics, neither Christian hermeneutics nor religious psychology, neither confessional theology nor mere rational philosophy. The word with which I would be less unsympathetic would be intercultural philosophy, without defining it further.